All right. We'll have to move on right now. Okay, in our last class, we talked about project integration management, which I told us that project integration management is one of the 10 knowledge areas we must be conversant with to execute our projects professionally. Now, there are knowledge areas when it comes to project management. When we say knowledge area, well organized areas as regards professionality that must be managed.
Sorry, that's okay.
So these are about 10 of them, and we must ensure that we have them well planned and we have knowledge about it. Okay, you can kindly unmute, so we would ensure that we are not getting. I don't want to mute all, because if I mute you from here, when you want to ask a question, I may not remember the knob immediately. So just kindly unmute. And so all the other knowledge areas, like the 9 knowledge areas, must be in connections with one another. So the project integration, like he says, when we make financial decisions like cost management decisions, it will have an effect on our timeline and the quality of our products too. At the same time, if a decision is reached about quality, it will affect the budget. So how do we understand the trade-offs? How do we know the decision made in one knowledge area is influencing another? Maybe management comes up with a policy of cutting down cost. They should rather think of reducing the quality too. And also know that the procurement strategy too would be changed, because if you cut down cost, some suppliers may be serving you because of how much you are willing to buy from them. Once you reduce your volume, they may move to the next buyer, mostly when you are in a monopoly market. So all these are decisions that influences one another. So project integration management helps us to consolidate, put the project in context, and helps us to integrate all other project management knowledge areas. And this we will do from beginning to the end of the project, so we can successfully satisfy our stakeholders. So it's all about making choices. Choices in resource allocation, considering the trade-offs, and also the competing objectives, and enabling us to look at alternatives. So as the name implies, is integration. When we want to integrate projects, we do 7 things. The first thing we do is to come up with a project charter. And once the project charter has been drawn, we move to the next phase, which is for us to draft the project management plan. Like I said, once the project management plan is achieved, the next thing is to move down to the executional phase, which is to direct and manage the project work. While we are directing and managing the project work, we will be watching out for new lessons learned, and we will be archiving them. At the same time, we will be monitoring and controlling the project work that is being executed. Then there is what is called the perform integrated change management. Changes are things, unwanted things that want to step into our project. Sometimes they may come through the cost aspect. You see that there could be changes in the market, and prices, our planned cost may want to go up, or actual cost may vary from planned cost. And that's why you see sometimes for contract, they call for variation. Why? Because the market conditions have changed. So what do? You can't just approve budget. You can't just release money, most especially when it's different from what is being speculated in the project management plan. You must raise what is called the change request and send it to the change control board to take a look at it, look at your justification to say this is what it, let's give out more money, let's increase the budget, or why not we avoid that by cutting that off the project scope so we would not do it again since we do not have the money. So once the decision is being reached, this change approved is called the approved or the rejected change request would be taken back into the project management plan and incorporated. Then thereafter, the project manager and the team can now go on with the execution proper. Yeah. You can now go on with the execution proper. At the end of the day, the project will be closed. You see, understanding these 7 step-by-step processes alone can enable us manage a project. This is the introduction. And you remember the first thing is the project charter, like I said, is gotten in the initial phase of the project, where the project manager interfaces with the market, interfaces with the environment, layers with the project sponsors and owners, understands their perspective, and come up with a summary of what would be required for the accomplishment of the project. So this is a summary of what we did. So now we have to move on to the next phase. And the next phase will be project scope management. Everything is built on everything. And I want you to understand that we talked about what project is. And we said to ourselves that project is a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique product, service, or result. Project is a temporary endeavor, which means it's an endeavor that does not last forever. Temporary is a big word when it comes to project management. So what is that temporariness? How long would it last? That is what we're going to be learning, how to define that, how to conclude that, how to plan that, how to manage that will be shared in the project schedule management, another word, project time management. But now we are talking about scope. Now let's go back to the definition again. Project is a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique product. When something is unique, it has distinctive features, is describable, which means it has boundaries. It has what must be included, and at the same time, what should not be part of it. So that's the word, unique. So this brings us to the project scope management, to create a unique product. So if we can't manage the uniqueness of that product, we will be creating something else. If we don't know how to manage, to plan the uniqueness of that product, if we do not know how to come about the uniqueness of that service, the uniqueness of that result, how can we know, how can we describe what we are doing and ensuring that we get that which we want to get, but nothing else? That is why we need to have some expertise in this knowledge area. Scope is about the boundaries, about the descriptions of what we do, what we want to do. So project scope management includes those processes required to ensure that the project includes only the work required, only the work required, and only the work required, you see, to complete the project successfully. Only, you don't want to do more than that. Doing more than that, who's going to pay for it? On whose account? So you must ensure, because if you do something else, you are creating something else. So the project scope management. So the scope has to do with the functionality of the product. It has to do with the features of the product. So managing the scope is concerned with defining and controlling what is and is not included in the project. And we have 6 processes that can guide us in getting the best out of this. One, the first thing we do is to come up with a plan, which is the plan scope management. When we plan scope management, we will have an output called the scope management plan. Can you see that? So the plan scope management is that process where which we sit down to create the scope management plan. And this scope management plan documents how the project scope will be defined, how the project scope will be validated and controlled. Beautiful. You see, the plan tells us how to be defined, who's going to be part of the team, how it can be validated, how it can be controlled. Now that we have this plan, this scope management plan, we now have to start looking for things that can enable us to realize that. And the second thing we do is to collect requirements. Now you have a plan of what you want. Now you want to go and get what you want. Is to collect requirement, and the process of that is the process of developing. Is the process of defining, taking jottings, taking logs. You're making documentations of what the stakeholders needs, what they need that will help us to realize the business objectives, what they need that will enable us to realize the project objectives. These are the things that we want to achieve. So how do you collect it? You go to your stakeholders and say, this project, what are your expectations? The person will say it, you write it down. You go to these other stakeholders, this stakeholder will say his own, you write them down. And once you have them being together, you would analyze them. Because you don't need an ambiguous scope. You need a scope that only talks about the job required and only the product that will be accomplished at the end. So this takes us to the next level, defining scope. As you are analyzing those requirements, this part, what when we say requirement, what are requirements? We have 5 ownership. A particular stakeholder is saying that he wants the product to have if it is a bottle for water that we are designing, he wants the cork to be blue. Another one will say, I want the band to be red. I want the bottle to be 50 cl. All these are requirements you are collecting from the output. So it is all these things which they have said that you will define to have the scope statement. You see, you define the scope, and defining the scope is the process of developing a detailed description of the project and product. Now, what you hear is what you would do when you are brought in to a project. You tell them we have to define the scope. The scope, sometimes they could have defined the scope before they bring you in, but you have to ensure that you go back to look at things, ensuring that what is not needed is not in it, because it is what is needed that money will be released for. If you thereby bury something that is not said into it, that thing will compete with an important feature that is required to be on your final product or on your final result. So you have the defined scope, just maybe 3 lines, just 3 lines. That this product will do this and do that. This product is for this and for that. And, just 3 lines. 3 sentences. And this scope now is just like somebody is going to unmute right now and from my understanding, give us a description of the building opposite his house. Though you cannot say how many rooms are there, so I want you to describe your previous house. Give us a description of your previous house, ensuring that 3 sentences is enough. I'm gonna choose who is not ready to get that done. And I'm going to bring in Frederick. Sorry, I'm not going to be appointing people randomly, but today, pardon me. Frederick, can you give us a description of your previous house? Assuming that you want me to construct it. Just kindly give me a description.
I would say, good evening all. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Yeah. I will say my previous house is a bungalow of 3 flats.
Okay.
Of 3-bedroom apartment. It is fenced.
Wow.
With a gatehouse. And all rooms are ensuite.
Wow.
The house is tied.
That should be enough.
Okay.
What's the meaning of ensuite? When you say ensuite, what does that mean?
It means every room has a bathroom and toilet in it.
Oh, okay. That's a new word for me.
This is Nigeria now, so it's different.
Yeah. It sounds so well. All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Frederick, for your willingness to want to talk about your previous house. So this is a scope. This is a detailed scope. But remember, for all what he has said, for us to realize it, we must come up with a plan. He talked about fences or fencing. What is the length? What is the height of that fence? So the scope statement is ambiguous, which means we need to further break it down. He said the rooms are ensuited. What is the size? What is the size of the bath? What kind of shower? We can't just understand the work from the statement, so we want to plan now in detail. We'll still be talking to him. We will move on, just like when some of you may not be conversant with these things, but you could have watched it on TV. For us that are born and bred in the village, we are conversant with a lot of things that you may not be familiar with. We go to the mangroves to fetch woods. We bring the woods in their sizes. Some will be so big. And then we pick this wood. Yeah, the wood is meant for cooking, roasting, but we will still bring them in until we start chopping them to smaller sizes. We will pick our axes, we will strike shapes and pieces will be jumping out of it, and we will be gathering it. We'll be striking according to the sizes that we think would be good, most suitable for us to make the fire. You see, the scope is that log of wood, so ambiguous. As it is, we can put fire on it, but it may not give us what we want. So we want to break it down into smaller and more manageable packages. And now that ambiguous scope must be cascaded, must be broken down into smaller and more manageable packages. Now, let's pick up the wood. Let's pick up the description of the bungalow. I don't want Frederick to go away because he is our man here, supplying us knowledge about the building. So that takes us to the next phase. Frederick, you are the man of the day. Please stay with us.
The network is wavering here.
Yeah, everywhere I am is worse. So now that you have that ambiguous scope being given to us, we need to break it down to understand what is inside the room. What is the size? What kind of ties? What is the length? What is this? That takes us to the next process called create work breakdown structure. The work breakdown structure is the process of subdividing the project deliverables and the project work into smaller and more manageable packages. I will show you a diagram. Did you know, before that you habitated that building, there used to be forest there, right? I want you to give me a buy-in, a feedback. If you can hear me, Mr. Frederick, I'm on you now. Before
Yeah, I can hear. I
you
can
got
hear
into
you.
that building, can you hear me, Mr. Frederick?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Before you moved into that building, there used to be a time that place was all forest, right? Grown trees,
Yeah.
bushes everywhere. And they went
That's
in
right.
to do what is called bush entry. They do it bush entry where they will have to, in your area, they pay what is called deve, right? Now, they do bush entry. And in that bush entry, the surveying can be carried out. And thereafter, they clear the place. Is it not that your scope they are breaking down into work that must be done? And after the clearing, they pack, they grub the things, they burn them, and they will do foundation where they excavate, they set out and excavate. They excavate the depth maybe to 1 meter below the head surface. They blind. They place the first blocks as they are doing their procurement too. Is another aspect of the work. They can now understand for the clearing. Could be that they are bringing in a bulldozer or they are using the community youth to come and clear. That is tied to everything about foundationing. Look at the job that all the smaller things. So that gives us the work breakdown structure. We are breaking the work, subdividing the work to smaller and more manageable packages. And that strategy is what we call decomposition. We are decomposing the scope being given to us by Mr. Frederick. We must define the scope, come up with a statement. Now we subdivide it so we can manage our job. If you do not set out, you would not know the length and width of the excavation that should be carried out for foundationing. Even the block work, you cannot estimate the blocks if you don't know the length of each room. And sometimes you may be restricted, ensuring that you have the building fitted in the available portion of land and suited, but there is a constraint, the available land. So This is about the work breakdown structure. You break it. That's how we will break it from foundationing to block work, from block work to roofing, roofing to finishing. And then we move in, right? That work break. So as we do that, there is another level called the validate scope. That is the process of formalizing acceptance of the completed project deliverables. Now that they finish excavation, are they not going to check in with those that gave them money to approve it if this is what they want them to do, if the house, the foundation is deep enough, if the foundation is seated in the right strata that is most stable to carry out that bungalow, they would be checking with them. And as they are doing that, they must ensure that the scope is being controlled. Like I said, unwanted things may come in. Workers are rushing. They want to just excavate one small tiny trench and run away. Somebody who had gone to buy cement, buying a bag that is not full. So that is the process of monitoring the status of the project and the product scope and managing the changes to the scope baseline. So when we define, we create the work breakdown structure, we now have the scope baseline. That is a baseline, everything must be achieved. So with this understanding, we now know what scope management is and what is required of us to do as professionals. We are still on page 1, whereas we have lots of pages to talk about. But with this understanding, when we get to what is required for us to okay, so now let's talk about the scope proper. For every project, we have two kinds of scope. We have the project scope and the product scope. What Mr. Frederick gave us was the product scope. And that is the features and the functions that characterizes a product, a service, or result. That is the project scope. The product scope is the work now that needs to be accomplished to deliver that product. What is the work? Excavation, procurement of cement. If it is a book that we are writing, research, gathering of materials, analyzing them, looking for gaps, writing to supply that knowledge that is missing there, coming up with the first draft, editing it, then we move down to publishing. If it is an IT project, we identify the challenge, we put together the team, we plan, and we carry out the execution proper. We achieve it, we announce it, and marketing can start. So, having said that, these 6 things which we have talked about, we need to know how to get them done. What do we need to plan scope management? Once again, I remind us that the scope management plan is the component of the project or the program management plan that describes how the project will be defined, how the project will be developed, monitored, and verified. How. And this gives us a guide and direction on how we can manage the scope throughout the project life cycle. What do we need? The first thing we need is the project charter. Second, we need the project management plan. Whereas the project management plan may not have fully been developed, but remember the project charter it's part of the project management plan. There could be project management plan in existence before the project manager may be hired. So you still need the project management plan to ensure that the scope is well defined, the scope is well planned. You ensure you go in there and look at all the things that are required. We also need the enterprise environmental factors. We need to be conversant with them. We need organizational process assets to achieve this. The tools and the techniques we would use. One is the expert judgment, which means we need professionals, people who have hands-on experience. Then we meet with them to gather data and analyze this data together to know what should be part of it and what should not be. Remember, we are talking about plan scope management, and we are looking for one output. The major output is the scope management plan. We need that scope management plan. And for us to achieve the scope management plan, I told us that we haven't come up with the plan. The next thing is for us to collect requirements. Now, how do we manage those requirements? You may not manage your requirement so well if you don't know that requirement management can lead to challenges. Remember, people are giving you knowledge of what they want. What if they conflict? What stakeholder A says he wants is different from what stakeholder B says she wants on a particular thing. So that's where the management would have to come in. So these are our two outputs, the scope management plan and the requirement management plan. I'm not going to talk about the project charter, but just in case you have forgotten, let me remind you. It gives us knowledge about the project context needed to plan the scope management process. And the project charter gives us a high-level project description and all the characteristics of that project. So when we talk about data analysis, what are we talking about? What data do we want to analyze? We want to analyze those requirements. Remember, the product that we are coming up with must be market fit. You see every product as a business, even if it's a house that you're building to want to move in, because sometimes people build homes and as soon as they are done, to them the design is outdated. And they would be thinking of, so you need to design to satisfaction. So you collect these requirements, you analyze them. You see how if the project scope is small, how you have to elaborate it. If it is too much, you have to reduce it according to the sponsor's budget. There's no way you will not think about how much the sponsors are willing to release if you want to put together the scope of the project. So you're analyzing how the product will be created, how the product will be validated, how the scope will be monitored and controlled. These are the data that you would analyze under the tools. Remember, it's not placed on stone. People would get this done. People who have been doing it would have to get it done. This brings us to the next phase. Having gotten the scope management plan, we move into the next phase called the collect requirement. Now we have to now start collecting requirements. In this process, we want to define, we want to document the stakeholders' needs. We want to be able to collect their opinion so we will be able to satisfy them. You just think of customer satisfaction. What does customer want? So this is the foundation. Requirement becomes the foundation of defining the scope. Requirement becomes the foundation of the work breakdown structure that we talked about. Requirement becomes the foundation of the cost which will lead to the project budget. Requirement becomes the foundation of the temporariness of that product, the temporariness of that project. And what quality are we going to be dishing out? So what do we need? What we need are the tools, are the input. We still have to go back in time and ask for the project charter. because of the preliminaries, the preliminary description, the preliminary budget, the initial risk identified, the stakeholders identified are cascaded in there. The people we want to talk to, their names are there in the project charter. Maybe not all of them, but the major ones. Yeah. And also, there might be existing documents about the project. We must ensure that we bring them to table to analyze all of them to know where we are going to. Some of these documents may be the market research conducted for the business case to be approved. This may be the business needs identified. Some of these project documents may be some things procured, some transfer of ownership maybe. Then with the business document proper are the business cases, the business objectives. And if there are existing consortium, maybe it's a business, two friends, two partners are putting together, we need to see the agreement so we can understand their stakes. Is it equal? One thing that in this class, those that are joining now may not know is the enterprise environmental factors and the organizational process asset. But I'm going to try my best to bring you up to speed. You need to be conversant with the enterprise environmental factors and the organizational process assets. We'll talk about it. So for the project management plan, which is an input, what do we want to see? We want to see the scope management plan, which was an output of the previous process that gave birth to the collect requirement. We want to see the requirement management plan, which was still an output of the previous one. We want to see the stakeholders engagement plan because the stakeholders were identified in the initiating phase. If there is an existing way of engaging, because you must come up with a plan on how you will engage the stakeholders before you now start going to want to talk to them and collecting their requirements. Remember, as a project manager, you are the man in the middle trying to ensure that you get the best from every single individual that have a stake on the project. We and our team are the so-called experts. Sometimes the stakeholders are experts. The man is calling you to come and conduct a market research of a new product for him. But whereas that man could have been a retired advertiser, maybe a retired business analyst. So he would contribute so much and ensure that you are getting a good job done. So he may be one of the experts. Then we gather data. Remember, collecting is gathering. And once the data are being gathered, we analyze this data. And these are the tools. When the data are being analyzed, we make decisions. And once these decisions are being reached, we will have to ensure that these decisions are being distributed to everybody so they can see what they are. But collecting requirements, talking to people is not easy. In project management, we say from experience that sponsors, stakeholders, project owners do not really know what they want. Because most times they are trapped in the fantasies of what they want to realize. Maybe the ownership of the best hotel in the city. Maybe the ownership of the best product in the market. But how can they realize that? They don't know what the best is. They may not even know the kind of doors they want you to plant there, the kind of material they want you to use in building that their product. They may not even know the lifespan of that material. They may not even know the cost of it. You are the one to help them think and dream well. You are the one to bring reality to their fantasies. So interpersonal and team skills is needed, or often you may be antagonized. Another tool needed is the context diagram. and another one is the prototype. I'm going to throw light in them. And your output, what you want to achieve by putting all these things together, is to realize the requirement document and come up with another knowledge called the requirement traceability matrix. The word requirement traceability matrix, you remember you have stakeholders, maybe in their numbers, that are telling you about different things of what they want. Some of them will speak according to the roof if it's a building. Some of them will speak according to the branding if it is a product. Do you know who says about what? So you must come up with a table. For instance, if it is a book, that is the project, writing a book is what we're embarking on, and somebody has spoken about the design of the cover. So you must identify all those that have said something about the cover design. You write them down on that cover and what they say against their names. So tomorrow, when we want to design the cover page, we know the few stakeholders we would be talking with. Another person could be talking about the font. Another one could be talking about the research area, the focus. Another business owner may be focusing on the market. His own is how he wants you to advertise the book. So when it gets to advertisement, you need to ensure that is the man you're liaising with. So your requirement traceability matrix does that for you. Who says what in the project? Yeah. So let's see if we can look at them. The project documents, the assumption logs, because assumptions are made right in the beginning of the project. Most of the things that are being planned for are things that may not be realistic, but according to tradition, according to standard practice, according to historical knowledge, we may just speculate. But these are things that have not been proven, not tested. So we put them in a particular diary called the assumption logs. And we will be moving alongside with them while we check them, we validate them. And as we are dealing with these people, we must go back in time. Project which we have done that is related to what we are doing, we must go look for it and bring the lessons learned. Or we generate a new register where we will be writing the new lessons learned. Then remember, we are dealing with people, and these people are called stakeholders. I defined who a stakeholder is. Stakeholders are those individuals or organizations that can influence your project positively or negatively, or those individuals or organizations that your product or your project can influence negatively or positively. And these stakeholders comes in different categories. We have major stakeholders. We have minor stakeholders. We have stakeholders with high power, low influence, or high power, low interest. Stakeholders with high interest, high power. These are stakeholders we must hug. Stakeholders we want to keep close to the chest. Stakeholders that we must be careful with when they breathe. We want to ensure that we are doing what, maybe because they are major investors. Their perception about the project would signify acceptance or rejection. So we want to ensure before we kick the ball, they are even helping us to position it, and we are checking with them if it's in the right position, facing the right direction before we take each shot. So yeah, I talked about two words that the enterprise environmental factors and the organizational process has set. Every project exists in an environment. Maybe a business environment, a different kind of industry per se, not even the territorial, not about the region, geographical position, even that too matters. Maybe the political condition of that area that the product will be sited. So you as a project manager, you must be conversant with these factors that can influence the processes. And these factors of the enterprise environmental factors could be internal to your organization. What is the culture? What is the structure, the infrastructure that are available inside or outside? There are some projects you may come up with, there are some ideas that you may not. But the world may not even be there. Talking about the materials that are being required for you to realize them and not yet been invented. So you still need to check about infrastructures that are available. Maybe they are being invented, but not in your terrain. Just last week, there's a research that I'm carrying out now at the University of Lagos, and this professor and I came up with a kind of 6 square inches magnet that is needed for the product that we are designing, that we are researching on, to come up with a prototype. We went on to Alibaba. We saw that there are vendors there that can take our specifications and build that product and ship it for us. But we now typed, we need this product. The first question was, who are your, first of all, who are you? This product can only be requested, orders can only be placed by top military generals. This product, in fact, your country is not allowed to, we are not allowed to ship this product to your country. That was the conclusion. That is to say, peradventure, we do not check, and somebody had gone in to pay us money to design that product without checking with the available infrastructure. We will now start gathering money every now and then, and we start the project, not knowing that that project will hit a dead end. These are enterprise environmental factors. Whereas if we were in China, maybe we can just walk into one factory, place our orders and wait, sit down there taking coffee, and they deliver it in the next 3-4 hours, and boom, we are out of the place. So these are things that influences your project. These are factors you must be conversant. What about the personnel administration? That could be internal. The people that are going to be making decisions, do they know exactly how decisions should be made within that project for the right product to be realized? Do we, as an organization, have knowledge about the marketplace condition? What is the marketplace condition? Like what we discovered was a challenge in the market. There are some materials, there are some requirements, some sponsors who say they want on their product that cannot be sourced by individual. It is only by organizations. Maybe the marketplace condition may be that is being controlled by monopoly, oligocracy. Just like in the oil and gas industry, you can't just say you want to buy a rig and somersault into the market and now start drilling for people. Nope. It's not done that way. So all these are things you must check. Can you see that the job of the project manager is so interesting? And you take these things step by step. When you sit down under AC, those that will go be doing the job will be saying, we are the ones that are doing the job. And whereas manager is just under AC, they don't know you are sweating all these things put together. They really don't know. I suffered that several years, that was when I was working with some group of construction personnel. They wouldn't know that I was building policies in the office. They wouldn't know that I was drawing. They wouldn't know that I was coming up with bidding materials. They wouldn't know what I'm doing. And every time they would tell me, I like your job. Soft job. Just sit down there. Your safety boot is not dirty, just clean. They don't know that I've not eaten because of what must be researched, what must be, or else the project will fail. You see, enterprise environmental factor. The next one I talked about was the organizational process asset. Process. We've been talking about processes, your policies, your procedures are part of it. And when we say assets, assets are things that makes you rich. The things that put money into your pocket, they are things that helps you to achieve. They give you leverage. Unlike this tool we are using today, this StreamYard we are using today is an asset because it's a software. It's enabling us to carry out this training project, which is a 3 months project for us. So I'm going to drop the material so you read and get yourself familiar with all the things which I have said here. Let's move on to the next. We talked about decision making, and in decision making, there are different ways we can carry out decisions. We would ensure that the stakeholders are either voting. When I say stakeholders can be internal or external. Maybe they want to vote for a particular conflicting requirement. It may be that we are deciding unanimity. Everyone has to agree to a single decision. Maybe say what they want, but we will look at plurality. Those that, if we have a particular requirement in a conflicting area, that lots of people have said yes to, we just take it. So, and sometimes you may want to be autocratic in your decision making, but that depends on the kind of power you have as a project manager, what kind of power you have as a sponsor. A sponsor who is supplying 10% of the cost cannot be autocratic. You're supplying 10% of the cost, whereas your counterpart is supplying 90%.
Um, we can't hear you anymore. We lost you.
Talked about context diagram. These are tools we use, and this is a visual tool that will enable us depict the product scope, and it will show the business system, like the process, the equipment, for instance, the system, and how people and the system will interact. The systems we want to use, the context is okay. Somebody using the Primavera software, how would they interact? What it will save us?
We lost you a little bit. Can you go back and talk about the observation and conversation, because we lost you when you were talking about decision?
All right. Thank you very much for calling my attention. I would like to do that. So I was talking about decision making as a technique and how we can reach an informed decision. I said we have some strategies. Remember, we are dealing with people. We cannot just wake up and be imposing what we want on them. So one technique is the voting. We'll say, let's give just $5 million to this project. That we can vote. Then at the end of the day, in the voting, we may come up with some decision. If we are 8 and 4 people are saying 5 million is okay, 3 people are saying 20 million is 2 million is okay, another one person says 6 million is okay. At the end of the day, if it's plurality, what happens? 5 persons are saying that, so we go by it. And then there are times because of our investment stake, somebody may be dictating everything. And also in decision making, the project manager's authority matters. We talked about organizational structure, the matrix organization. We talked about the strong matrix. We talked about the projectized organization and how the project manager is powerful. For those that have not watched the videos, please go back and watch them. So you cannot be autocratic if you do not have, if such powers have not been given to you. So this is how you make decisions. And we can also sample multi-criterias in decision making. What are the multi-criterias? We may want to come up with affinity diagram. Affinity diagram is when we look at large number of ideas and we start grouping the ones that looks like one another, because we are designing, trying to come up with a scope. We are trying to manage our scope. We are trying to define what must be done and also identify those things that should not be done. Then there's what is called mind mapping. And this will enable us showcase decisions, come up with an idea. And all these are how we represent our data. The mind mapping with the stakeholders, those that the project can influence positively or negatively, those that can influence the project positively or negatively. We identify large number of ideas through process of backtracking. On what you have said and the things others have said, are they similar? So different ways, maybe observation, maybe conversation. And another word for conversation is called job shadowing, where you have somebody talking, another person is listening, like now as a trainee, or maybe a first timer when you join the company, they may want to do job shadowing, where you sit down and be working with the professionals. You'll be looking at what they do and they'll be giving you responsibilities and they'll be telling you how it's been done, and that is how the project will be done, and the criteria, the scope will be realized. So when we want to look at how the softwares, the infrastructure that we have in the organization can be used by human to create the result, we depict it with a tool, a software called the context diagram. And that will enable us to look at the processes and how the humans who function in those processes, and it's like a simulation, a simulator. Who knows about prototype? If you don't know it, kindly Google it. I need somebody to tell us about what they know about prototype. Okay, I'm listening. Who wants to go?
Isn't prototype in the experimental stage where you make the first product, and that product, the one that you've made, is what is being duplicated for commercial purposes? I only know about prototype in like aeroplanes when I was in aviation.
That is it. We do that in everything that we do. You understand? In all the projects. The prototype is a method of obtaining early feedback on requirements by providing a working model of the expected product before actually building it. Is it not what you do in the aviation industry? But these are tangible products, at least touchable, seeable. When you get into some offices, you will see that an estate is being designed, constructed in a way, and is on top of a table. That is a prototype. It allows the stakeholders to experiment with the model and have a perception of how their decisions will appear finally. Is that clear? Did you lose me?
Oh no, I could hear you.
Did you lose me?
No, we could hear you.
Yes, you did. Yeah, you can hear me now, but I think you lost me.
Well, not
Hold
from
on,
my
I can
end.
see that. Okay,
Not at all.
not at all. All right, let's move on. Okay, so we let's move on. So we've talked about the requirement traceability matrix. We also talked about the we've talked about the multi-criteria decision making. We've talked about the requirement documents, which I was explaining before we got here. Now, yeah, the requirement document may be that they are speaking about the business needs and the opportunity and so on and so forth. So that area can be read. This brings us to define scope. Now, the output we had, the requirement traceability matrix, and the requirement documentations. Now the requirements have been documented. All what is needed have been documented. And this requirement that have been documented may be the business need or the opportunity to be the describing the limitation of the current situation and why the project has been undertaken. Could be the business or the project objectives. For traceability, could be the functional requirements describing the business process, can be the acceptance criteria. Because a particular stakeholder may say, this is, if you can do this and do that, I would accept the final product. So it could be the business rules stating the guiding principles of the organization. This could be the support and the training requirement just to get the team upskilled. Could be the assumptions that are being made and the constraints that are being identified. All these are things that falls within that. So this brings us to define scope. We now have to define scope. Like I said, define scope is the process of developing a detailed description, like what was given to us by Mr. Frederick. He gave us a scope. So now that we have collected all the requirements, have them been placed in the requirement document. What happens? We have to now define the scope. Define scope is the process of developing a detailed description of the project and the product. Like I said, project has what? Two kinds of scope, product scope and the project scope. This is where we define it. So the preparation of a detailed project scope statement is very important because that is what fuels the success of the project. So what do we need? We also need now, you can see that lots of things have been repetitive. The project charter is coming in as an input. The project management plan is coming in to enable us to define the scope. The project documents, all the project documents must be gathered because we want to ensure what has transpired. If they've bought anything, let's know. If there's an agreement, existing agreement, let's still know because we want to define the scope. Now we still also have to know the enterprise environmental factors. You don't want to go and conclude on a product that the resources needed to put it together cannot be shipped to a country where you are. That is where the enterprise environmental factors will come in. Also the organizational process asset. What are the tools? What are the knowledges members of your team would have in such a project?